Okay, what we're going to try and address here is the cause of the American Revolution. In other words, what caused the split between Great Britain and its colonies? In 1763, the colonists saw themselves as loyal British citizens who just won a war. And in 1776, they are declaring independence from England. How does that split happen? We'll address that question here. The first source of tension was a series of laws passed immediately after the French and Indian War designed to restrict and tax the colonists. So let's deal with those right now. First, we have the Proclamation of 1763, which restricts colonial movement to east of the Appalachians. They're not allowed to go west of the Appalachian Mountains. This is particularly frustrating to frontiersmen. Then we have the Sugar Act. The Sugar Act is a tax on sugar, sort of a renewal of the old Molasses Act, molasses and sugar being used as raw materials for rum. Then we have the Currency Act. The pen to work here, which is just a control measure. It would not allow the colonists to print their own money. We have the Quartering Act, which would allow the British troops to be housed inside the homes of colonists. Then we have the Stamp Act, particularly upsetting to colonists because this was such a pervasive tax. This tax would be a tax on all printed goods. It resulted in the Stamp Act Congress, the first united anti-British congressional meeting, in which boycotts were organized and a declaration or a statement was issued to England, who promptly rescinded the Stamp Act but responded with the Declaratory Act, which said, yes, we will rescind the Stamp Act for now, but remember, you're the colonists and we're the kingdom, and we can declare any laws we want. It was really a statement of force. Okay, next. The responses to these acts were both violent and nonviolent. The violent response to the Proclamation of 1763 was the Paxton Boys, a group of frontiersmen who attacked and killed Native Americans in the West. They also attacked them in Philadelphia in a prison and took several of them out, including women, and killed them. The nonviolent responses, as we already talked about, the Stamp Act Congress was one, and boycotts was another, both various degrees of effectiveness in addressing complaints against England. All right. Another set of taxes from England was the Townshend duties. These were taxes on basic raw materials such as lead, paint, and paper. These, again, angered the colonists and were met with resistance, sometimes in the form of tarring and feathering the stamp or the tax collectors. As you can see, violence is starting to increase, which results in occupation, military occupation by lobsterbacks or redcoats, the British troops, they are occupying Massachusetts. Tensions hit a peak in 1770 when British troops opened fire on American colonists, killing 5. Some would say this is the first fighting of the American Revolution. It wasn't probably not as lopsided as this picture seems to suggest. This picture was used as a piece of propaganda to anger colonists, and like most propaganda, it worked. Okay. All right. In order to raise more money, again, England passed the Tea Act. This goes back to the old mercantilist relationship between the mother country and the colonies. The belief in the Tea Act was that the colonies must buy only British tea from the British East India Company. The colonial response at this point was to dump the tea into the Boston Harbor. They were dressed as Indians. but they were watched by thousands or hundreds at least from the docks. They were cheered on, but the British considered this an act of, I think the language we would use now is economic terrorism. They just considered it treason or certainly a high crime. And at this point, tensions are getting pretty serious. The British respond with something known as the Intolerable Acts. These are also known as the Coercive Acts, in which they put Massachusetts under martial law. This is important to understand. The port is closed. All public town hall meetings are stopped. They lose their charter. Again, more troops. So tensions are mounting, and most of the heart of the revolution at this point is in Massachusetts. In response to these intolerable acts, the Congress meets for another time at what's known as the First Continental Congress. So this happens in 1774 in the fall. Two major things are accomplished in this meeting. One, boycotts are formalized. They're no longer going to be dealing with British goods. And two, the Second Continental Congress is scheduled for May of the following year. That's pretty important. That Second Continental Congress is scheduled. Before that can happen, however, fighting breaks out near Boston at the Battle of Lexington and Concord. In this battle, British troops are trying to get to Concord, where they have learned there is an armory with colonial weapons. They're met first in Lexington, where there is a resistance from colonial Minutemen. And then on the way back from Concord, British troops are hit by guerrilla fighters, basically, the colonists attacking them from the trees. They suffer serious casualties, and then they begin the siege of Boston. All right. So at this point, even though the war is not officially started, there is fighting in Massachusetts. The Second Continental Congress meets in May of 1775, and the first attempt, led by John Dickinson from Pennsylvania, is to issue what's known as the Olive Branch Petition. The Olive Branch Petition, being a symbol of peace, is an attempt to reconcile with England, and they issue this to the king. They appeal to him as British citizens and say, can we please avoid all-out war? This particularly angers John and Samuel Adams from Massachusetts, because they don't see how all-out war can be avoided since they are already in all-out war. But they bide their time. The king ignores the Olive Branch Petition, pays no attention to it. There's no positive response. Thomas Paine then writes his famous Common Sense in early of 1776, and then the famous beginning of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, is written by Thomas Jefferson, and of course it is also edited by Ben Franklin and John Adams. At this point, war is on. And finally, what's next? Did the Founding Fathers know, when they were signing that Declaration of Independence, that they were headed for all-out war? Chances are, yes.